The night my daughter-in-law's secret lover walked through my front door, I realized I didn't know my own family at all. It was a Sunday evening, the kind that always made me feel both proud and a little tired. I'd spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of roasting chicken and garlic, the windows fogged from the steam of boiling potatoes. My hands were still dusted with flour from rolling out pie crust, and my back ached in that familiar, satisfying way that comes from feeding the people you love. Family dinners had always been my way of keeping us together. Even as the kids grew up and moved out, I insisted on it. One night a week, everyone under one roof, no excuses. My son, Daniel, and his wife, Leela, were always the first to arrive. Daniel with his easy smile and Leela with her quiet, careful way of moving through the house, always offering to help, always calling me Mom in that soft, respectful voice. That night, the table was set for 6. My husband, Harold, was in the living room, half watching the news and half napping in his favorite chair. My daughter, Tessa, was running late as usual, texting me updates every 10 minutes. I was just pulling the chicken from the oven when I heard the front door open and Daniel's voice echo down the hallway. "We're here, Mom." I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped into the hallway, ready to greet them. Daniel was carrying a bottle of wine, grinning, his cheeks pink from the cold. Leela followed, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, a bouquet of flowers in her hands. "Hi, Mom," she said, holding out the flowers. "For you." I smiled, taking them from her. "Thank you, sweetheart, they're beautiful." She smiled back, but there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. A flicker of nerves, maybe, or guilt. I brushed it off. Leela was always a little anxious at family gatherings, always worried about making a good impression. Daniel set the wine on the counter and gave me a quick hug. "Smells amazing in here. You outdid yourself again." I laughed, swatting his arm. "You say that every week." He winked, "And I mean it every week." I sent them into the living room to say hello to Harold while I finished up in the kitchen. I arranged the flowers in a vase, set them in the center of the table, and took a moment to breathe. I loved these nights, loved the way our home filled with laughter and stories and the clatter of silverware. It was the glue that held us together, or so I liked to believe. The doorbell rang just as I was pouring gravy into the boat. I glanced at the clock. Tessa, finally. I hurried to the door, wiping my hands on my apron, and pulled it open with a smile. But it was Tessa standing on the porch. It was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and a nervous smile. He was holding a small box of pastries, shifting from foot to foot as if he wasn't sure he was in the right place. Hi," he said, glancing past me into the house. "Is Leela here?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, she is, and you are." He hesitated, then smiled again, a little tighter this time. "I'm Alex. I'm a friend of Leela's. She invited me." I stared at him, my mind racing. Leela had never mentioned inviting anyone. She'd never brought a friend to dinner before, not once in the 5 years she'd been married to Daniel. I forced a polite smile, stepping aside to let him in. "Of course, come in, Alex." He stepped inside, glancing around the hallway as if searching for someone. I closed the door behind him, my heart beating a little faster. "Let me just get Leela," I said, my voice steady. "She's in the living room." I walked down the hallway, my mind spinning. Why had Leela told me she was bringing someone? Why did she look so nervous when she arrived? I peeked into the living room. Daniel and Harold were deep in conversation. Leela perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Leela," I called, keeping my tone light. "There's someone here to see you." She looked up, her face draining of color. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "Who is it?" Daniel asked, glancing up. "Just a friend," I said, watching Leela carefully. She walked past me, her steps slow and hesitant. I followed her to the hallway where Alex was waiting. When she saw him, her eyes widened, and for a split second I saw something pass between them, something electric, something secret. "Alex," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, relief flooding his face. "Hey, Leela." They stood there, staring at each other, the air thick with tension. I felt a chill run down my spine. Daniel appeared behind me, frowning. "Leela, who's this?" She turned, her face pale. "This is Alex. He's an old friend." Daniel looked from Leela to Alex, confusion clouding his features. "I didn't know you invited anyone." Leela swallowed, her hands twisting in front of her. I thought it would be nice." I watched them, my heart sinking. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the way Leela avoided Daniel's eyes, in the way Alex looked at her, in the way the air seemed to crackle with unspoken words. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. "Well, the more the merrier. Dinner's ready." But as we walked to the table, I knew nothing about this night would be merry. We gathered around the table, the clatter of plates and silverware filling the silence that had settled over us. I tried to keep the conversation light, asking Tessa about her new job, teasing Daniel about his latest attempt at home improvement. But my eyes kept drifting to Leela and Alex, watching the way they sat just a little too far apart, the way their glances darted toward each other and then away, as if afraid to be caught. Leela barely touched her food. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on her plate. Alex, for his part, tried to make small talk, asking Harold about his garden, complimenting my cooking. But his voice was tight, his smile forced. Daniel seemed oblivious at first, too busy telling a story about a mishap at work to notice the tension. But as the meal went on, I saw his brow furrow, his eyes narrowing as he watched Leela and Alex. He reached for Leela's hand under the table, and she flinched, just slightly, before forcing a smile and squeezing his fingers. I tried to focus on the food, on the familiar rituals of passing dishes and pouring drinks, but my mind kept circling back to the look I'd seen on Leela's face when she opened the door. Fear, yes, but something else too. Guilt, longing. After dinner, I brought out the pie hopping dessert would smooth the edges of the evening. Tessa helped me in the kitchen, her voice low. "Who is that guy, Mom? Leela looks like she's seen a ghost." I shook my head, keeping my voice just as quiet. "She said he's an old friend." But I've never heard her mention him before. Tessa frowned, glancing over her shoulder. "Daniel's starting to notice. He keeps looking at them like he's trying to solve a puzzle." I sighed, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. "Let's just get through dessert. We can talk later." We carried the pie back to the table, the sweet smell of cinnamon and apples filling the room. Alex thanked me, his voice softer now, almost grateful. Leela barely looked up. As we ate, the conversation grew more strained. Daniel asked Alex where he was from, what he did for a living, how he knew Leela. Alex answered politely, but his answers were vague, his eyes flickering to Leela as if searching for permission. Finally, Daniel set his fork down, his voice gentle but firm. "So, how do you two know each other, really?" Leela's fork clattered against her plate. She looked at Alex, then at Daniel, her face pale. We met in college. We were friends." Alex nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, just friends." But the way he said it, the way his eyes lingered on Leela, told a different story. Harold, sensing the tension, tried to change the subject, asking Tessa about her apartment. But the damage was done. The air was thick with suspicion, every word weighed down by what wasn't being said. After dessert, Daniel offered to help me clear the table. Leela disappeared into the bathroom, and Alex stood awkwardly in the hallway, staring at the family photos on the wall. Daniel leaned in close as we stacked plates in the kitchen. "Mom, do you know what's going on? Leela's acting strange. And that guy, I don't know, something feels off." I shook my head, keeping my voice low. "I don't know, honey, but I'll talk to her." He nodded, worry etched into his face. "Thanks, Mom." When everyone had left, Tessa with a quick hug, Alex with a mumbled goodbye, Daniel and Leela in tense silence, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty plates and half-eaten pie. The house felt colder, emptier, as if the secrets that had been brought to the table had sucked all the warmth from the walls. I washed the dishes slowly, my mind racing. I thought about the way Leela had looked at Alex, the way she'd flinched from Daniel's touch, the way Alex had seemed desperate to say something but held back. I knew, deep down, that something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong it was. That night, as I lay in bed beside Harold, listening to his steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how long the truth could stay hidden. I wondered what would happen when it finally came out. And I wondered if our family would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't lift. I moved through my usual routine: coffee, a quick walk around the block, watering the plants in the front window, but my mind kept replaying the night before. Every glance, every awkward pause, every word left unsaid. I waited until I heard Daniel's car pull out of the driveway before I called Leela. My hands shook as I dialed, the phone pressed tight to my ear. She answered on the third ring, her voice small and tired. "Hi, Mom. Leela, can you come by this morning? I'd like to talk." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, the faint sound of a television in the background. "Is everything okay?" "I just want to see you, please." She agreed, and an hour later, she was at my door, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. She looked younger than usual, almost like the girl Daniel had brought home all those years ago, nervous and eager to please. I made us tea, the familiar ritual calming my nerves. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun slanting through the window, dust motes dancing in the light. "Leela," I began gently, "I need you to be honest with me. Who is Alex?" She stared into her cup, her hands wrapped tight around the mug. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, she whispered, "He's not just a friend." I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. She took a shaky breath. "We were together before I met Daniel. It was serious. I thought it was over, but we started talking again a few months ago. I never meant for it to go this far." My heart pounded in my chest. "Does Daniel know?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, I never wanted to hurt him. I love him, I do, but when I saw Alex again, all those old feelings came back. I tried to end it, but he kept reaching out. Last night, he showed up without telling me. I swear I didn't invite him." I believed her. I could see the pain in her eyes, the guilt etched into every line of her face. But I also saw something else, a longing, a confusion that went deeper than simple regret. "Leela," I said softly, "you can't keep living like this. Secrets have a way of coming out, and when they do, they hurt everyone." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know what to do." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "You have to tell Daniel. He deserves the truth. You both do." She squeezed my hand, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm scared." "I know," I said, my own voice trembling. "But you're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." That afternoon, Daniel called. His voice was tight, strained. "Mom, is Leela with you?" "She is," I said, glancing at Leela, who sat hunched at the table, her face buried in her hands. "Can I come over?" "Of course." He arrived 20 minutes later, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He barely looked at Leela as he sat down across from us. "Leela," he said, his voice shaking, "I need to know the truth. Who is Alex? Why was he here?" Leela looked at me, her eyes pleading. I nodded, giving her the strength she needed. She took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's someone I used to love. I thought it was over, but it is. I'm sorry, Daniel. I never wanted to hurt you." Daniel stared at her, his face crumpling. Are you having an affair?" Leela shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, not physically. But I've been talking to him, meeting him for coffee, texting. I know it's wrong. I'm so sorry." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain. "Did you know?" I shook my head, my own eyes filling with tears. "I only found out this morning." He nodded, his jaw clenched. "I need some air." He walked out the back door, leaving it swinging behind him. Leela sobbed quietly at the table, her shoulders shaking. I sat there, caught between my son and his wife, my heart breaking for them both. I sat with Leela in the kitchen for a long time after Daniel left, the silence between us heavy and raw. She wiped her eyes, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. "I never wanted this, Mom," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt him. I got lost. I didn't know how to ask for help." I squeezed her hand, feeling the ache of her words. "Sometimes we all get lost, Leela, but you have to decide what you want now. You can't keep Daniel in the dark, and you can't keep Alex waiting in the wings. You have to choose." She nodded, her face pale but determined. "I know, I'll talk to Daniel. I owe him that much." I watched her gather her things, her movements slow and deliberate. Before she left, she turned to me, her eyes red but clear. "Thank you for listening, for not hatting me." I shook my head, pulling her into a gentle hug. "You're family, Leela. That doesn't change, even when things get hard." After she left, I called Tessa. I needed to hear my daughter's voice, to ground myself in something steady. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I told her everything, about Alex, about Leela's confession, about Daniel's heartbreak. Tessa listened quietly, her silence heavy with understanding. "I'll call Daniel," she said finally. "He shouldn't be alone right now." I thanked her, feeling a small measure of relief. At least he wouldn't have to face this pain by himself. That evening, Daniel came home. He looked exhausted, his eyes swollen from crying. He didn't say much, just sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. I made him tea, the way I used to when he was a boy and the world felt too big for him. He wrapped his hands around the mug, his shoulders slumped. "Did you know she was unhappy?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, honey, I thought you two were doing well, but sometimes people hide their pain, even from the ones they love most." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I thought I was enough for her. I thought we were happy." I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "This isn't your fault, Daniel. People make choices, sometimes for reasons we can't understand. All you can do is decide what you want to do next." He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if I can forgive her, Mom. I don't know if I want to." "That's your choice," I said gently. "But whatever you decide, I'll be here for you." He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom." The next day, Leela called. She wanted to talk to Daniel, to explain everything face to face. I told her she was welcome to come by, that I'd give them space. When she arrived, I left them alone in the living room, the door closed behind them. I busied myself in the kitchen, my heart pounding with every muffled word, every pause, every raised voice. I heard Leela crying, Daniel's voice breaking. I heard apologies, confessions, the sound of two people trying to find their way through the wreckage of trust. After what felt like hours, the door opened. Leela left first, her face streaked with tears, her steps slow and heavy. Daniel followed, his expression unreadable. He sat with me in the kitchen, silent for a long time. "I told her I need time," he said finally. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't pretend everything's okay." I nodded, my heart aching for him. "That's fair, Daniel. Take all the time you need." He looked at me, his eyes full of pain and something else, resolve. "I just want to do the right thing, Mom, for me, for her, for us." I hugged him, holding him close, wishing I could take away his hurt. But I knew this was his journey now, his choice to make. The days that followed were heavy with uncertainty. Daniel stayed with us for a while, sleeping in his old room, moving through the house like a shadow of himself. He went to work, came home, ate quietly at the table, and spent long hours walking the neighborhood in the evenings. I tried to give him space, but I also made sure he knew I was there, leaving his favorite snacks in the pantry, folding his laundry, sitting with him in silence when words felt too heavy. Word of what happened began to ripple through our small community, as secrets always do. Tessa called often, checking on her brother, offering to come home if he needed her. I told her to wait, to let Daniel find his own footing. Harold, for his part, was quiet but steady, offering Daniel a place in the garage to tinker with old tools, a silent kind of comfort that only fathers can give. Leela moved out of the apartment she shared with Daniel and into a small place across town. She called me once, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I never wanted to hurt any of you." "I know, Leela," I said, my voice gentle. "But you have to take care of yourself now. Give Daniel time. Give yourself time, too." She thanked me, and I could hear the relief in her voice. I knew she was hurting, too, even if her choices had caused the pain. At church, the whispers started. People who had always smiled at me now looked away, their curiosity barely hidden. A few friends reached out, offering casseroles and kind words, but there was a distance in their eyes, a wariness, as if betrayal might be contagious. I held my head high, refusing to let their judgment define me or my family. I reminded myself that every family has its secrets, its heartbreaks, its moments of shame. Ours was just out in the open now. One Sunday after service, the pastor pulled me aside. His voice was gentle, his eyes kind. "If you or your family need anything, please let us know. These things are never easy, but you're not alone." I thanked him, feeling a wave of gratitude and relief. It was a small kindness, but it meant the world. Daniel's friends reached out, too, some with anger, some with confusion, a few with quiet support. He told me one night, his voice low, "I never thought I'd be the one people pitied, Mom. I always thought I had it all together." I squeezed his hand. "No one has it all together, Daniel. We just do the best we can." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I guess that's true." Meanwhile, Alex's presence in town didn't go unnoticed. He tried to reach out to Leela, but she kept her distance, focusing on her work and her own healing. I heard from a neighbor that he'd been seen at the coffee shop, sitting alone, staring out the window. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity for him. He'd caused so much pain, but he was human, too, lost in his own way. As the weeks passed, the initial shock faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. Daniel started going out with friends again, slowly reclaiming pieces of his old life. Leela sent a letter to our house, addressed to Daniel. He read it in silence, then tucked it away in a drawer. He didn't tell me what it said, and I didn't ask. I watched my son grow stronger, day by day. I watched him learn to live with the pain, to let it shape him but not define him. I watched our family bend, but not break. Spring arrived quietly, with the scent of lilacs drifting through the open windows and the sound of birdsong in the mornings. The world outside seemed to move on, and slowly, so did we. Daniel found his own rhythm again. He started running in the early mornings, his shoes thudding softly on the pavement before the sun was up. He spent more time with Tessa, meeting her for coffee or helping her with small repairs around her apartment. Sometimes, he'd sit with me on the porch in the evenings, watching the sky turn pink and gold, the silence between us comfortable and easy. One night, as we sat together, Daniel spoke quietly. "I think I'm ready to move back to my own place, Mom." I nodded, pride and sadness mingling in my chest. "You know you're always welcome here, but I think that's a good step." He smiled, a real smile this time. "I'm not angry anymore, not at Leela, not at myself. I want to start over." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "You deserve that, Daniel. You deserve to be happy." He looked at me, his eyes clear. "I learned a lot, about forgiveness, about what I want in a marriage, about what I won't ignore next time." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle between us. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we never wanted to learn. Leela, too, began to heal. She called me every so often, her voice steadier each time. She started seeing a counselor, working through her own regrets and confusion. She and Daniel met for coffee one afternoon just to talk. When he came home, he told me, "We both apologized. We both cried, but we both know it's over." There was sadness in his voice, but also relief. The chapter had closed, and both of them were free to write new ones. I found my own peace in the small things, tending my garden, baking bread, reading to my grandchildren over the phone. I let go of the anger I'd felt toward Leela, toward Alex, even toward the neighbors who whispered behind my back. I realized that holding on to bitterness only made the pain last longer. Our family dinners changed. They were smaller now, quieter, but still full of love. Tessa brought a new boyfriend one Sunday, and I watched Daniel smile and shake his hand, the old wounds no longer raw. We laughed, we shared stories, we remembered that family is not about perfection, but about showing up for each other, even when things fall apart. One evening, as I sat alone on the porch, I thought about everything we'd been through. The secrets, the heartbreak, the slow, stubborn work of forgiveness. I realized that in the end, we were stronger for it. Not because we'd avoided pain, but because we'd faced it together. Sometimes, the people we love surprise us in ways we never imagined. Sometimes with joy, sometimes with heartbreak. I never thought I'd see the day when a stranger's face at my dinner table would unravel so many secrets, or that my family would be tested in such a public, painful way. But life has a way of teaching us that even the strongest bonds can be stretched, and that healing is possible, even after trust is broken. If you've ever faced a betrayal in your family, or had to choose forgiveness over anger, I hope you know you're not alone. We all carry scars, but we also carry the power to heal, to forgive, and to begin again. Sometimes, the hardest conversations are the ones that set us free. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have confronted the truth or tried to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need a little hope tonight. Thank you for listening and for being part of this family. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, even after the storm, there's always a new day.